Greetings, students. Welcome back to class. This week, last week we canceled class because of the American Academy meeting and some obligations that I had to do. Nominated one of my friends for an award and had to put together a introduction video and some other stuff. So apologize for that. Should have just canceled it on the syllabus. I need to update the syllabus, and I'll do that this week and repost it just to keep it organized as the semester has unfolded, just to kind of update that. Lecture today, I have some slides I'd like to go through, touch on several subjects. We'll do that, and then not necessarily an assignment this week, but I am going to push out a quiz. It'll be multiple choice. You'll do it on Canvas. It'll be online. So I'll have that up available hopefully by tonight, maybe tomorrow morning, and you'll have until Tuesday evening of next week to complete the quiz. Okay, so I think I might have mentioned Sunday night, but it's taken me a bit to get this content out this week. So hopefully you're all doing all right. Let me go ahead and share the screen. This time around, I hope I can share the screen effectively. I do have some videos in this lecture that I want, so I'm going to upload the slides. If you start the PowerPoint slides within your web browser or within your computer, when you start the slides, you should be able to click on these videos and play them. I don't think I'm going to play them. I might play just a few minutes of like a couple of them, but I would like you to go, as you have this video open and you're watching it, you can pause me and then just click and watch the whole video just to save time for this video. Okay, so just some content I wanted to share with you today. I would rather us talk about your resumes and the background process. I'd rather talk to you about those things in person. So next time we meet in person or have a live Zoom session and you have questions about that, you could go ahead and ask me. I think that'd probably be better than me just trying to tell you about it in a recorded video like this. Very important things. The application process, a lot of our second year students are going through that now. And there can be a lot of questions there, and like how to fill out the background packet and all that stuff. So, all right. So today, sorry, a bunch of emails. Today we're going to talk about some of the, we've been talking about ethics, okay, and you've watched a video of some of those criminalists talking about ethics for those organizations. Today we're just going to quickly go through. I think every person who teaches this class for you is going to go over some of the ethical codes for the kind of main professional organizations. The main professional organizations in my mind are the American Academy of Forensic Science. And then for our region, that's the kind of national. Another national one for me will be the Society of Forensic Toxicologists. And then for locally, locally, I think probably the California Association of Criminalists, CAC, and the California Association of Toxicologists, CAT. So those organizations are going to be the top for me in my mind. So yeah, just kind of keep that in mind. Okay, so let's get into that, and we'll just go. I'm going to go over the ethical codes of a couple of these organizations. We'll start with the American Academy, and so it's pretty easy. I can drop their these organizations' bylaws here into Canvas, just for your own information. For quiz purposes, kind of be thinking about what are some of the general themes you see within these code of ethics, but not necessarily like the fine details, because that's silly. Definitely don't need you to memorize professional organization codes of ethics, but I want you to be thinking about, what they are saying, right? So, all right, so the American Academy really starts off just, if you do engage in some of these activities, there are methods to like kind of kick you out of the organization, and this happened. Egregious sort of abuses, ethical violations certainly are enough for you to, get removed from a professional organization. And so if you read this, every member and affiliate of the academy shall refrain from exercising professional or personal conduct adverse to the best interests and objectives of the academy. So there's professionalism in here, integrity, competency in the members' actions, right? And what you'll see is a lot of these code of ethics get even more and more detailed. Now, this American Academy one, says no member shall misrepresent his or her education and training, experience, expertise, or membership status. So those are kind of a big thing, because we'll talk about in a lecture maybe next week, those like sort of rock stars of professional misconduct that I think that's what I named that lecture, where we do highlight some of these criminalists and professionals that have sort of followed a path to the dark side, if you will, and have engaged in misconduct. And so with great consequence, especially for our field, when you've touched samples from hundreds of cases, those are all cases where the evidence that has been collected has to be sort of thrown out if it was all sort of analyzed inappropriately, and there was misconduct by the analysts. So pretty profound consequences for that. So you'll see that, I think, in a lot of these, right? So you can't. One of the famous people that we'll talk about, famous quote unquote, one of these bad apples, if you will, told everyone that she had her master's degree in forensic science, and that turned out that wasn't the case. So talk about boosting, making things more stringent for the application process is a fallout of some of these things that have happened. Okay, so C here, letter C here is no member shall materially misrepresent data or scientific principles upon which his or her conclusion or professional opinion is based. So basically, don't make stuff up. And so you will find, when you get out there in the world and you get into this field, you will run into defense attorneys in particular. Now I'm not like I'm not talking trash about defense attorneys. In fact, a lot of defense attorneys that I work with are very level-headed, understand basic science, and they're just doing mostly like their due diligence to understand the sort of consequences of, like for my expertise, the toxicology results for a case. That being said, there are some defense attorneys out there, and a couple of famous ones, that will just, hired gun, quote unquote, and will just kind of say anything they can to persuade the jury to disregard any of the evidence. And so those types of people would, obviously never be allowed to be in this academy, in like the Academy of Forensic Science, because there's blatant misrepresentation of scientific literature to sort of, bolster that person's case. So and D here is no affiliate of the academy shall use public statements that appear to represent the position of the academy without without obtaining authority from the board of directors. So you're not allowed to go out there, I guess, and speak on the behalf of the academy unless you have authorization to. So really, and there's more bylaws there, but for that code of ethics, that's really, the basics for that big national organization that just had its meeting last week. Now the CAC is another one. This one actually has much more detail. So this is the California Association of Criminalists, and they break down their code of ethics into different sections. So ethics relating to the scientific method, talking about how, I love A, the criminalist has a truly scientific spirit and should be inquiring, progressive, logical, and unbiased. Now, being that I do work with a lot of public defenders, there is an aura out there for sure in the courts that the state's criminalists, so you guys, if you get your job, in the LAPD crime lab, the Orange County Sheriff Crime Lab, the LA County Sheriff Crime Lab, when you are working in those, there is this sort of like bias, I guess, that the criminalists are sort of gunning for the prosecution, right? Like they're just out there to say whatever they need to so the prosecutor can win its case, right? In my experience, that couldn't be, farther from the truth. A lot of our graduates from our program here at Cal State LA are criminalists working in the field, and they'll come to the classes and they'll tell you they very often upset the prosecutor because they're unable to give them what they want, what they think they need, right, to win a case, because all they can talk about is the science and the data that they've collected and what it means and what it doesn't mean, right? And that's all they can really do. And that's how it should be. And so I'll let you read through the rest of these here, but you can see that, we have stuff about the scientific method, and some of these are tied into like Dobbert criteria. So things that are, generally accepted, stuff like that, kind of neat. And then it continues. So like the, this is, ethics relating to, let me see here. There you go. Opinions and conclusions. So this is sort of ethics that's going on in the courtroom for sure. So, interpretation of evidence, the conclusions that you draw, and making sure that you're not commenting on things that are out of your field. So, if I get called into court and I'm asked a question about toxicology, then I feel like, we feel like that I have, I've gotten the court's approval to be sort of an expert in that field. I have my PhD in toxicology. But if I start getting asked questions about DNA results, well, I really can't comment on that because I've never performed the STR DNA analysis. So it's not my area of expertise by any means. So I would definitely have to refrain from commenting on, anything, or ballistics, right? Like, tool mark analysis. Like I've never done that, right? That's not my field. I really can't talk to that. And so a lot of the code of ethics kind of will go into that, and CAC goes into great detail here. Okay, so another nice national organization is the Society of Forensic Toxicologists, or SOFT. This is another great organization, especially for those of you who are interested in toxicology, to join. There's student memberships for all these organizations. And that just means that, you don't necessarily have voting rights, but your yearly dues are much cheaper, and you can attend conferences and stuff like that. So SOFT basically says here, I agreed to conduct myself in a professional manner in accordance with the following ethical principles. So perform activities with honesty, integrity, objectivity. So some of these terms, keep those in mind. Maybe a quiz question: honesty, integrity, objectivity. Refrain from knowingly misrepresenting professional qualifications. Okay, that we've talked about that one already. So like your education, your training experience, certifications, etc. Hold in confidence and refrain from misuse of information obtained or received in the course of professional activities. So kind of interesting one there. Provide expert advice and opinions within the limits of individual competence and generally accepted scientific principles. Pretty good. Render testimony in a truthful manner without bias or misrepresentation. So when I do get hired a lot by the public defender, I mean, I could care less if they win their case or not, right? I mean, that's not what I'm there for. The lawyer is there to try to win his or her case, right? And more power to them. I come in and like I have to talk. They have a question about methamphetamine levels in a person, and I tell them, basically everything I can tell them about methamphetamine. And often I'll get questions like, can we say that the drugs made this person do this thing, right? And that's definitely one of the things where I say, no, that's not how it works. We don't. I can tell you about general behaviors that individuals can have on that type of drug, but there's no magic concentration of drugs that will make someone go grab a weapon and go hurt someone, right? So I can't say that. And so kind of interesting, and there's a lot of like nuanced things in the field for sure. So So those are some of the code of ethics. Like I said, I'll drop those bylaws into the Canvas web shell and they'll be there for you. I don't remember how long this video is, but as you can see, we all should be able to see it and hear it. So let me just play it for a second, see how long it is. This is like 5 minutes. I'll go ahead and play this.
A heinous crime has been committed at Vox. Somebody keeps drinking the single source Ethiopian Yirgacheffe coffee that I bring to the office for myself. I rounded up 5 suspects from around the office and fingerprinted them to see if I could find a match from a print I found on my mug. Is fingerprint analysis reliable enough to pin somebody to this unspeakable crime? And more importantly, how do you actually do this? To help me figure out what the hell I'm supposed to do, I brought in an expert.
My name is Peter Valentin. I'm an expert in crime scene reconstruction and forensic science. A fingerprint is probably the most important piece of information when we don't have a known connection between the victim and the offender. We have to find something that people leave at scenes relatively easy, and something that is unique enough that finding it and identifying what it is will lead us back to the person.
In order to find a fingerprint, investigators will either use a physical component like a powder, so not cocoa powder? Cool. Or a series of chemicals that make a print visible on a surface. Our fingerprints have ridges and furrows that align to create unique recognizable patterns.
There is what's called a loop right here. You have ridges that are coming into the pattern and then coming back out. Here's another loop right here. There's arches and there's whorls. And those 3 categories alone comprise at least 95% of the fingerprints that are in the database.
Everyone's fingerprints have unique features that differentiate them from everyone else's. For instance, this ridge splits into 2 here, and this ridge has a break in it. These patterns remain the same throughout a person's lifetime, which makes them a powerful identification tool. My fingerprint is pretty easy to spot. The pattern looks like a 1998 Chrysler Sebring. Investigators rely on the characteristics of a print to find a match, using a method called ACE-V. First, they analyze the print and the surface it's on to see if it's viable for examination. This one's great. This one, not so much. Then they take the suitable print and compare it against known fingerprints, looking for points of similarity and differences. For example, both these patterns are whorls, and bifurcate right here. Investigators look at these traits and try to gauge if there's enough points of comparison to declare it a match. Finally, a qualified peer reviews their conclusion to verify the match. After using high-tech software to analyze the prints from my mug, I'm kidding, this is just some stock footage I downloaded, I think I finally found a match. But okay, even when it's done by professionals, how reliable is fingerprint analysis?
It's a useful tool that obviously has value, but I think it's problematic to overstate its value, especially in a criminal justice context.
One accuracy study found that examiners made false positive identifications in 0.1% of cases, which means identifying a print as a match when it's not. That doesn't sound too bad, unless you happen to be one of those false positives. Brandon Mayfield, a lawyer from Oregon, was one of those unlucky few. He was falsely accused of the 2004 Madrid train bombing because the FBI made a false positive match with a partial print found at the scene. Mayfield seemed like a good suspect to investigators because he had recently converted to Islam and was the lawyer for a man who attempted to join the Taliban, which in the wake of 9/11 were all red flags for the FBI.
There was a bias that existed because once they tentatively identified the unknown fingerprint as belonging to this individual, who he was and what his background was made the identification seem stronger than it actually was.
He didn't have a valid passport, so it's a little implausible on the face of it that he was handling a bag of detonators in Spain. Fingerprinting was so powerful that they just sort of, it trumped everything else.
Mayfield was even given his own analyst to examine the prints, and even they agreed that it was a match.
That's an interesting thing about bias because, everybody's assumption is that the experts are biased toward the side that they're working for. Here was a guy who was working for Mayfield, and yet he corroborated the evidence against him, which turned out to be incorrect.
The FBI released a 330-page report about where their analysts went wrong, and it's pretty much a case study in a lot of the potential downfalls of fingerprinting. They cited things such as ignoring differences between the prints, lack of independent verification, the pressure of working on a high-profile terrorism investigation, and letting bias about the suspect affect their analysis. Their report summed it up by saying, in any human endeavor, there is a potential for error.
You know, I would sort of suggest learning from history and realizing that none of these things are going to be error-free. So there's going to be mistakes and errors and screw-ups, but also evidence is inherently probabilistic.
So even though it's not a perfect tool, until a more reliable technology emerges, law enforcement will continue to utilize fingerprint analysis. And I won't ever be fully certain of who stole my coffee until I catch them on this new surveillance camera that I installed.
So I thought that was actually a pretty fun video, highlighting the Brandon Mayfield case, if you hadn't heard about it. And that case brings out some of the things we were just talking about. And unfortunately, you know, the Mayfield case, you know, brings up this topic that we'll be discussing for the next few slides. And that's, you know, where some of the forensic science areas have needed improvement. And again, it's like they say in the video, it's not to say that fingerprint analysis is completely not useful. It's just that, you know, there was a dogma for a long time that, you know, hey, here's a match, it's 100%, right? Well, you can't say 100% unless you analyze all the fingerprints in the entire world and have some sort of like statistical parameter to assign, oh yeah, we're 100% match. So you can't really talk about that. You can't say things are like 100% match, right, in the courtroom, because you don't know that. And then the dogma that, you know, no two fingerprints are exactly the same. That's been sort of a dogma with fingerprint analysis. And you know, has anyone actually tried to test that? You know, and so that, you know, that's difficult to do. So what really has sort of come out of some of these high profile forensic science blunders like this one, highlighting fingerprint analysis, is just, I think, to be more stringent in how you interpret the results, right? You know, these fingerprints, you know, do have many common points that appear to match. I'm not a fingerprint analysis. I'm not exactly sure how they describe it in court now, but I think, you know, cases like this really changed, you know, basically how that type of evidence is interpreted. Okay, so hopefully we all saw that, since I'm still sharing the screen. So the National Research Council then created you know, Strengthening Forensic Science in the United States, a Path Forward. So that's this, you know, big report that you've probably heard of. I'll try to drop that in Canvas as well, so you can take a look at that. So that NIS report. And so one of the main conclusions there in the report is, with the exception of nuclear DNA analysis, no forensic method has been rigorously shown able to consistently and with a high degree of certainty demonstrate a connection between evidence and a specific individual or source. Okay, so that's kind of a big statement there. For the biologists and the DNA people that want to work in DNA, honestly, the only, as far as identification goes, I mean, DNA sort of got like a pass, just because that is a technique that is steeped in biology. It was a tool designed for research for other purposes, but then, you know, used in a forensic purpose. And there's lots of data associated with that technique and statistics. And so you're able to talk about with specific certainty, you know, how likely, you know, one person's DNA is compared to another. So that's very powerful. But things like fingerprints, for example, or bite mark analysis, not so much. So that was a kind of a big thing. So also, that video talks about the bias and how huge that is, right? Like, when you got one expert say this is a match, that makes the second expert come in and, you know, they don't want to disagree. they might be biased, and so they'll say it's a match. And even the person that Brandon Mayfield hired to come in was like, "Yep, it's a match." But Brandon Mayfield was nowhere near Spain; had nothing to do with that bombing. And so it's quite amazing, right? How powerful having the predisposition or having an idea already in your mind that this person is the culprit, for example, can really persuade your conclusions. And so for me, that's why I kind of really like toxicology, for example, because there's not really that and toxicology wasn't really brought up in this report either. I mean, because it's analytical chemistry, right? The drug is there or it's not, right? There's not that much ambiguity, and there's this much of it and there, right? So the interpretation in toxicology is often like, well, do we know how much, do we know what someone's behavior was with that drug concentration, right? That's difficult and harder to do, even more so in like, say, a deceased individual trying to contemplate based on their drug levels we found in a body that's been dead for a while. Can we say anything about what someone's behavior might have been? So those are tricky, but we can say with great certainty, this is the quantity that we found, and this is the drug that we found, and there's no denying that, right? So that's kind of nice. So some of the other findings were the potential for conflicts of interest between the needs of law enforcement and the broader needs of forensic science are too great. And in some, the committee concluded that advancing science in forensic science enterprise is not likely to be achieved within the confines of the DOJ. So that we need more to sort of solve this. And so that bias, that sort of law enforcement bias, has prompted some agencies to sort of detach completely. So, obviously that's not the case here in California. In our building, we have our criminal justice department. We have the Los Angeles Police Department crime lab. We have the LA County Sheriff crime lab in our building. Other states have completely removed the forensic science from law enforcement altogether. They've done that in Texas. So there's a Central Texas Forensic Science center. Law enforcement is not there. There's not a sheriff overseeing the crime lab there. Evidence goes to scientists at this crime lab. They're not working for any of the agencies. They're not working for the sheriff. They're not working for the police chief of that city. They're performing the science. They're giving their interpretation, and people think that that's probably a better approach. And I would argue that that's probably true. It probably also helps in the courts, I would imagine. You got the LAPD criminalists coming in, right? And that defense attorney is just like, oh man, this guy's just gunning for the prosecution because they're all in cahoots, right? Well, if it's the scientists from the regional crime lab that has not associated with any police agency, you can imagine that relieving some of the possible biases that could come into courtrooms. So kind of interesting. This next is a case, State v. Ward, 2010. Recently, the field of forensic science has come under scrutiny on a nationwide basis. When articulated from the right of a criminal defendant under the Sixth Amendment of the United States Constitution to confront forensic analysis as witness on trial, Supreme Court of the United States versus Melendez-Diaz was quick to recognize the significance of a landmark report issued in the 2009 National Academy of Sciences. Oh, so here we have an example. Trial court abused its discretion by allowing the individual here to identify evidence as a controlled substance based on visual inspection. And so the fallout, this is an example of the fallout, right? Some of these cases, they're saying like, look, they're like calling in, the 2009 Academy of Sciences to say, hey, we can't use this evidence. And this is actually an interesting case. So the point of this one is just to say, like, look, there's big ramifications from this report. It's kind of a big deal. It's being called in as, hey, this is why you can't say what you're trying to say in this case. Look at the Academy report. So it shows up. This one's interesting too, because they're saying like the controlled substances they try to identify based on visual inspection. I wouldn't be happy with that. Honestly, you got to do some sort of test, right, for that. So, so the report to the president, forensic science and criminal courts, ensuring scientific validity of feature comparison methods. So here we have in 2016, so several years after the 2009 report. So there have been updates then, especially for comparison methods. A lot of the language in these reports, I think, deals with the interpretation. What you can say and what you can't say. So this is the PCAST report then, essentially, that's come out from that. They did a year-long study, compiled and reviewed a set of more than 2,000 papers from various sources, and obtained input from forensic scientists and practitioners and judges and defense attorneys, and made some recommendations directed at the National Institutes of Science Standards and Technologies, or NIST, White House Office, FBI, etc. So it's just another report. So really trying to take what we learned from the NAS report and try to make some change. And so I have the PCAST reports here and an addendum. I'll let you link out to those. I'll try to drop it in the Canvas, but here's links out to PCAST report. Let's see if it works. No, I'm not going to do that because I don't want to screw up the screen like I did last time. So take a quick look at the PCAST report as well. Okay, so some of the findings and some of the just I do kind of want you to take a look at the PCAST report for quiz purposes. Obviously nothing super detailed I want you to grab from it. It's a long report, but please just check out just like the table of contents and just kind of check it out. And I might have like a quiz question on that. Just kind of keep that in mind. Some of the findings regarding scientific validity. So only single source samples of DNA and fingerprints are scientifically validated. Okay, which is kind of interesting. The issues with like DNA analysis and fingerprint analysis is when there's like multiple fingerprints overlapping, so multiple sources there. That's really hard to distinguish, and they're saying that it's not really validated. Also, while DNA analysis is very powerful, one of the huge downfalls of the standard, STR analysis is when there's a mixture, right? So there's blood at the scene, and it's like 3 or 4 people's blood because there was like, a shooting and multiple people died. That really confounds the interpretation of the DNA analysis if there's multiple sources. So that's a big drawback. When it's single source, we're good, is what they're saying here. And then bite mark, shoe print, hair comparisons, interpretation of mixtures of DNA, right? Not validated, and some are even invalid. So they're saying don't do that. Hair is an interesting one too, right? Here's a brown hair, here's a brown hair we found at the crime scene. They used to, I think, say that like these are very similar and they might be from the same person, but I think that that's gone by the wayside. You really can't say that unless there is like a little piece of skin that came along with the hair. If it got pulled out forcefully, then you can do like DNA analysis on that, right? So so some of these forensic science methodologies kind of got beat up as well in the PCAST report. So PCAST recommendation, where there is no meaningful information about the accuracy of a forensic feature comparison method, U.S. DOJ attorneys and examiners should not offer testimony based on that method. Okay. In testimony, examiners should always state clearly that errors can and do occur due to similarities in features and due to human mistakes in the lab. And that's something that people, I guess, weren't doing early on as well. So there are errors associated with analysis, all analysis, and that you should state what those are. Now, this is kind of interesting. The National District Attorneys Association kind of like had a response to this report, the PCAST. The PCAST position regarding the use of forensic science is scientifically irresponsible. So they're kind of upset because of how often they will use these comparison analysis techniques. They're kind of adopting any of the recommendations would have a devastating effect on the ability of law enforcement, prosecutors, and the defense bar to fully investigate their cases, exclude innocent suspects, implicate the guilty and achieve true justice at trial. So interesting response from the National District Attorneys Association saying like, oh, we've been using these comparison methods for so long. We're very upset if we're not able to do that, use those. But you can see here that, you know, in some high profile cases like Brandon Mayfield, that, you know, maybe there is an issue here. Now, and then it goes further to say, notwithstanding the lack of qualifications, PCAST has taken upon itself to usurp the constitutional role of the courts and decades of legal precedent and assert itself as the final arbiter of the reliability and admissibility of the information generated through these forensic science disciplines. So pretty strong response here to the PCAST report. The DOJ response was, the attorney at the time, Loretta Lynch, said in a statement to the Wall Street Journal, while we appreciate their contribution to the field of scientific inquiry, the department will not be adopting the recommendations related to the admissibility of forensic science evidence. So some serious pushback from these reports. And what they've been trying to do then since this PCAST is like move forensic science more to a sort of federal, maybe have there be like a national forensic science standard for everyone. We're not there yet. I'll let you watch this video in your slides, but it's going to say what's kind of happened in some of those areas moving forward. And you know, it's still a moving target, and there's still some things that need to be shored up for sure in forensic science, making sure we're all doing everything in an appropriate way. And I can tell you that there's certainly a lot of variability from lab to lab, from state to state. And so, you know, some people think that that's a problem, and, you know, how people do forensic science. And so maybe there should be a national standard. And so I think this video talks about some of the things that they're looking at for that. And that's all I have for you today. Appreciate you listening and watching. Like I said, there'll be a quiz popped up either tonight or tomorrow morning. You'll have till Tuesday evening. It'll be just a short answer response style. Appreciate you all. And I will talk with you soon. Thanks a lot.